Good evening, everyone. This is the Black Post. And for this evening, I really want to take up the mantle and talk about Stop Asian Hate. Let me tell you exactly what this is to me. This is CoonSh. This is something that the Democratic Party has essentially switched the narrative from white supremacy on Black people to Black supremacy on Asian people. There's no time ever in history where foundational Black Americans or even the Coon immigrants that some come over here and try to essentially start organized attacks against the Asian community. Have there been 2 to 4 incidents of Black people essentially attacking Asian people for whatever reason that may be in the public? Of course they have. But have you noticed, have you accounted, have you seen the history of the past Asian hate towards Black people? See, this story, this narrative has yet to be televised and broadcasted on all the major networks like Fox News, CNN, ABC, NBC, MSNBC. The narrative has switched. Now that they don't have the bigoted in chief with Donald Trump, which we still have a bigoted in chief with essentially Joe Biden, but this is not what they want us to realize, that they continue to pull the veil over our eyes and they use coon shit. Okay, whether it be from coons that are FBA, coons that are immigrants, or white and Asian coons, in order to push the narrative that Blacks are attacking Asians in large numbers. This is a farce. This is a lie. This is a hate fantasy that has been created most likely from the Democratic Party. And out of this narrative, out of the paradigm being changed and switched from white supremacy, the Asian community has essentially turned the tides of history with an executive order that is condemning with punitive action the xenophobic and the intolerance of combating racism when it comes to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. See, Blacks, we have never received such protections under the law, let alone some legislation and regulation that primarily targets the Black community, that has memorandum condoning and combating racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against Black Americans in the United States. We have never had this, and we've been the most targeted group, whether it be about white supremacy, the buffer class, or those in support of white supremacy. Now, we have to be realistic. Now, if I were to ask the question, do you believe there's more Black versus Asian hate, or there's more Asian hate versus Black hate? And I'm not trying to switch the narrative. What I'm basically trying to do is tell the truth in the most plainest form that I know of. I'm trying to tell the truth, report the truth in the most plainest way that I know. This is the issues that we have in the Black community when the media, the mass media, the propaganda, and the coon shit that they spew out, and then somehow, some way, we begin to transform our coon class in support of legislation and acts of this manner. See, you can't go around starting a whole paradigm shift of stop the Asian hate, and then you put blackface on it, where most of the attacks have been from white supremacists, have been from white supremacists and race soldiers, not from the Black community. If anything, there's more attacks on Asians attacking Black women than there are of Black people, period, ever attacking Asian people, especially in this country that we live in, the United States of America. So before I go on, I would like for you guys to listen to some news stories here, some news clippings. The first 2, around 3 to 4 minutes, but I think it's imperative to set the platform so you guys can totally understand what we're getting at here, because it's important. is very, very important. Let's listen to this.
Hate crimes against Asian Americans spiking since the pandemic began a year ago. Nearly 3,000 incidents reported. During his testimony on Capitol Hill today, the FBI Director Christopher Wray telling lawmakers the Bureau is concerned about the rise in crimes against Asian Americans. CNN's Amara Walker has that story and a warning for you. Some of the video you're about to see is graphic.
He slashed me from cheek to cheek with a box cutter.
Noel Quintana was attacked on a packed subway in New York last month at the height of the morning rush hour.
There's really a lot of blood oozing. So I was so afraid.
Afraid he would die on his way to work after encountering this man identified here by New York police. Quintana, a Filipino-American, says the stranger repeatedly kicked his toe.
Let's stop it right here. As you can already tell, CNN is already setting the premise for who is the culprit of the Asian hate attacks. You just saw a black man being posed as a culprit in this particular case.
Bag. And when he confronted him about it, the 61-year-old says he was viciously assaulted.
So I asked for help, but nobody came for help.
Quintana believes he may have been targeted because of his race.
Because of the COVID-19, I think there are more Asians being attacked.
According to Stop AAPI Hate, which tracks these kinds of attacks, there have been nearly 3,000 incidents against Asians reported across all 50 states since March last year. The Asian advocacy group says nearly all of them were unprovoked. Though rights groups don't know the exact cause of the surge, they say a clear pattern of targeted hate has emerged since the pandemic began.
They told me to go back to China.
In Los Angeles, 27-year-old Denny Kim says he was punched in the face by two strangers. The LAPD investigated.
Again, if you notice, they're setting the narrative, they're setting the platform, so you automatically think there's a large movement of hate crimes from the Black community to the Asian community. They told me to go back where I came from. When have Black people ever spoke on this level? Never. And the one person that they showed, there was 2 or 3, I think no more than 4 occurrences where Asian Americans were being attacked by Black men, but these Black men were non-FBA and they had mental issues. But see, we're going to continue to build this because we're going to see that the hate is not from the Black community on a large scale, but from the white community. But again, this is the narrative that the Democrats, essentially most likely them, in accordance with the Republicans, has shifted the white supremacy hate towards Black versus Blacks versus Asian hate, where we know in the Black class, in the Black population, we do not have power to shift the paradigm either economically or in the racist behavior of this, what we have right now.
The case as a hate crime. On Thursday, police say a 36-year-old Asian man who was stabbed from behind in New York's Chinatown is now in critical condition. Although the NYPD said the suspect would be charged with a hate crime, no such charges have been filed.
This was driven by hate.
In San Francisco, authorities say an 84-year-old immigrant from Thailand died after being violently shoved to the ground in January. A 19-year-old man facing murder and elder abuse charges.
It's been heartbreaking and devastating for me and so many Asian Americans.
Andrew Yang, New York City Democratic mayoral hopeful, tells CNN that while former President Donald Trump's rhetoric may have fanned the flames of anti-Asian sentiment,
Kung flu,
racism against Asians is nothing new.
Certainly having the President of the United States saying things like Kung flu and China virus did normalize an association between the pandemic and people of Asian descent.
Our employees are heavily impacted by this.
Jason Wang, CEO of Xi'an Famous Foods, says violence against 2 of his Asian employees on public transit in separate incidents gave him no choice but to cut his business hours at all 8 Chinese restaurants.
One was punched so hard that his glasses broke.
Despite the pandemic forcing him to already close 6 locations, Wang says safety is more important than the bottom line.
One of the biggest reasons for that is to make sure that employees feel at least a little bit safe.
I can't handle it anymore. The problem with this family, and this is another video for another time, is that they continue to show Black people. Now, we understand that as Black people in America, we are solely the economic base for Asian Americans or Asian immigrants that come over here and start businesses, because they start their businesses up in where? In Black neighborhoods. Do you know why? Because the white dominant society has boxed Asians out of their business sectors and also their business districts. And that's why most likely you will find most Asian businesses, whether it be Japanese, Korean, Chinese, and Filipino and Vietnamese, are mostly located in Black communities in the form of restaurants, nail shops, and hair salons. We continue to get undermined by the Asian class, all the while they're actually telling us that we should stop hating them and assaulting and putting violence on them. This is the CoonSh that is actually being projected out into the Black community. And we also have developed and created, in some instances, invented Black coons in order to support the Asian community. I'm about to take a page out of Tariq Nasheed's book and basically say, hold your own nuts. For hundreds of years, Black people have been under the boot of white supremacy. And in some instances, Asian supremacy, especially those Africans that go over to Asia and try to start businesses, just like Asians and mostly the Chinese go over to Africa and start businesses and exactly practice racism and discrimination of those African brothers in those Asian countries. But they would like to switch the perspective and the paradigm to say that, oh, Blacks in large numbers are attacking Asians. First and foremost, there's no organized agenda to hurt Asian people. When have this occurred? But I guarantee, ladies and gentlemen, if you go on to YouTube and you type in Asian hitting Black woman or Asian nail shop owner attacks Black, you will find multiple, not one, not two, not three, but multiple videos displaying Asian people assaulting Black people. And see, even Asian people know that this narrative, and they like to run it, because now Black people used to be the victim, and now we're the victimizer. You see how this propaganda has essentially shifted the paradigm, and Asian Americans actually have real legislation to back them and protect them? This is what they have. They actually have an agenda. They actually have an executive order to protect them, where Blacks around the world have been racially profiled, discriminated against, tortured, hung, burned, boxed, red zoning, the Highway Act. The list continues to grow, even as a nation, even as a global economy evolves. But that's okay. I digress. I would rather show you some more accounts of this propaganda being spewed by the Democratic Party.
It must have been a month after lockdowns in New York City.
I was going to my car with my cart.
A lady started following us.
And this guy in this big giant Suburban almost ran me over. He didn't yield to me.
She started screaming things directed at me.
About all kinds of terrible things.
Go back to China, you're so dirty.
You effing
Family, are you seeing
Ever
this?
since we
That
moved here
Asian
from
hate has been
Thailand
part of their
in
everyday
1960,
lives?
I've heard
Like this has
so
been
many
part of our entire
discrimination
history in
statements.
this
We
country.
were told to go back to our country from our own pastor. I have been told that we all look alike. Obviously, we don't look alike.
I was heavily bullied when I was in middle school. They would make like slanted.
Talk about this. Every Asian person in this country has a country. The only group that originated in this country as Aborigines are foundational Black Americans from 1526. We're the only group of people that does not have a neighboring or adjacent country that we belong to. I said country, not continent. Yeah, there's some strong roots that stem us back in the continent of Africa. But in the continent of Africa, there's over what? 50 countries. And some of us have done Ancestry.com, 23andMe to find out where our DNA actually roots from. But there's not one particular country you can say that you're actually from, even with the DNA testing. It's all over the place. But these agents have a country that supports them and back them, but we do not. So when they're talking about we have always experienced Asian hate, it must be the new generation of Asians that are essentially grew up in America, but they're not talking about the baby boomer class, because these are the classes that came over in large groups being immigrants to the US. But as far as foundational Black Americans, we have essentially have always been native to this land, but we've always been treated like immigrants of this land. That is a problem I see.
I guess gestures at me. They would mock my accent. They would sexualize me. My former vice principal, actually told me that it was a good thing. People are catching yellow fever.
Growing up in Texas, some people being like, hey, you're like my first Asian friend. That's so cool. And like, of course it would make me feel uncomfortable, but I would be like, okay, like I see where they're coming from. Like they're ignorant. They're not trying to be racist.
Oh my God, just stop. I'm tired of the Asians actually feeding into this bullshit, or AKA CoonSh. I'm just tired of it. They even have Asians who have not been attacked to speak up for other Asians who've been attacked. And what they're not doing is displaying, ladies and gentlemen, all of the attacks. So what I have done, I took a snippet. I took a clip from Professor Black Truth. I want to give credit and honor and homage to that particular young guy, even though he's an older guy, but very, very intelligent guy. He has his own channel, Professor Black Truth B1. Go look him up. That's, again, Professor Black Truth. Okay. And we all stand for B1 because we're all on the same code. We're all on the same agenda. And when things of this perplexity comes out, to again change the narrative of white supremacy against Black and other groups, but mostly we're going to speak for ourselves. We need to stop speaking up for everybody else. Again, hold your own nuts. So if Asians are getting attacked mostly by the dominant society, AKA white supremacists, then they should not try to help the white media shift the narrative that Black people have been attacking you. There have only been 3 to 4 attacks of Black Americans that they've been identified as immigrants from Jamaica and mostly Africa. Okay, non-foundational Black Americans, but there's probably been 1 or 2, just to kind of be realistic in this approach. But nonetheless, what they continue to push is that we're going out in large numbers attacking Asians. You know that, and I know that, fam. This is not what we do. We have never largely attacked a group of people. We should be attacking white supremacists, but we have never largely and or supported attacking a group of people based upon their heritage, based upon their lineage. We have not done this. So again, I have taken a clip out of Professor Black Truth's commentary, and I would like to share this with you. This is for fair use purposes. So I want you guys to sit back and listen to this brother, how he breaks it down of the hate from the dominant society to the Asians, and somehow the narrative been switched.
I think they targeting to the Asian American community.
We need the Black community to realize that that Black people.
I thought I was going to be able to not stop this, but I want you to listen to what this guy is saying. He actually calls out the Black community. Ladies and gentlemen, We are the third most populated minority at 13.4%. Out of that 13.4%, there are 40 million Black Americans. Again, 40 million Black Americans. And he is calling out to the Black community as a monolith, okay? What state, what city, what county, what town is he talking about? But he's talking to 40 million foundational Black Americans, hopefully, Black Americans, in a sense of we are a monolith going out in groves, going out in groups and entourages, attacking Asian Americans. He's setting the premise of what this video is talking about. And I just, again, want to give honor to Professor Black Truth for putting this together. And then his commentary on it, it's staggering, it's astounding, and it's very informative. And I need you guys to listen. Please listen where this is going.
Community.
We need the Black community to realize that that Black people are hurting Asians, and they need to speak out in their own community.
3 weeks later.
I was at the office last night late when news broke of this shooting, mass shooting. And, you know, there was a lot of discussion in the newsroom, and pretty quickly AAPI Stop Hate put out, Stop AAPI Hate put out a statement, which I want to read in part to you, because I think, you know, we're in the initial stages of an investigation that will no doubt be thorough and confusing. And we're getting at all of the motivations of this suspected shooter.
For weeks now, we've had the white media trying to manufacture a phony outrage campaign about Black people attacking Asians. This has, we know, been nothing more than a white media false flag operation. But most people are gullible and lazy, and where Black people are concerned, most people in this country prefer to believe whatever perverted lies the white media doles out about us, because it's fun to have something to be afraid of, especially when you know the thing that you're pretending to be scared of isn't really a threat to you to begin with. This is what Malcolm X talked about when he said that with skillful manipulation of their media, they can turn the perpetrators into the victims and the victims into the perpetrators.
This is exactly what I'm talking about, family. We need to really understand what's going on in the media. Now, I want to share with you, that was the beginning of his broadcast. And I really wanted to get that out of the way so I can break down another piece here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share with you the video that I've cut so I don't take all of his commentary. So that's what we're about to look at right now. And again, this is from Professor Black Truth. Bear with me as I put this together. Okay, I'm looking for the clip, guys. Bear with me very quickly, please. I put together a clip that is not actually showing to you guys, but nonetheless, here's the thing. I put together a clip because this brother masterfully put together information that breaks down the amount of vitriol that the media has for Black people and how they're switching the narrative and in order for us to believe this farce that is what's going on. All right, I believe I found the actual clip here. Give me 1 second. All right, here we go. Let's get rid of this one. And this is the one that we need. Sorry to do this stuff in front of you guys. I thought I had this set up. So my apologies. And we all have to listen. I'm gonna try to cut through the chase here. Let's see where we was. All right, here we go. He saw us to break this down right around here. So let's listen to this.
I think they targeting to the Asian American.
Zhang, a couple jail time.
In part to you, because I think, you know,
sorry about that, family. Here we go.
Of an investigation that will no doubt be thorough and confusing. And we're getting at all of the motivations of this suspected shooter.
Now, keep in mind, this is just a few highlights. If I had to list them all, we'd be here till 5 in the morning. But here's just a few highlights of white supremacist aggression against Asians. Vincent Chin, killed in 1982 by 2 white men. His killers got no jail time. Nguyen Phan Nguyen, beaten to death in 1992 by a gang of white men who shouted white power. Michael Cho, shot to death in 2007 by police in La Habra, California, who of course were not punished. Thang Nguyen, shot to death in 2016. Neither of the 2 men involved in his death were charged. 2017, Ying Ying Zhang, a college student, was abducted by Brent Kristen. He raped her, beat her, cut off her head, and mutilated her body. Oh, is that a little bit too far in the distant past for you? Not recent enough? Okay, here's a few more closer to the present. 2019, Arthur Matanovich killed 3 Asian men in New York by beating them to death with a hammer. He said he did it to protect Asian women from abusive Asian men, and you'll find that delusion about white men trying to be heroes, thinking that they're being heroes for Asian women, that's a common theme that you'll find with these white supremacists who kill Asians. March 10th, 2020, John Wiseman called the police and told them that his Asian wife was on the floor unresponsive. He left out the part about how he'd shot her 3 times. At least one of those shots was in her back as she lay on the floor dying. Multiple witnesses reported that the couple had a volatile relationship characterized by disputes over money and infidelity. One witness told authorities that Wiseman wanted a divorce, but was unwilling to divide their money and property equally because he, quote, earned his. May 2020. A Seattle-based amateur MMA fighter named David Altamar accosted an Asian couple walking in their neighborhood. Altamar is also a suspect in several other hate crimes against Asians. He'd broken into an apartment complex to, quote, locate and attack North Koreans. He also broke into a building owned by Google and was talking about killing North Koreans. In another incident, Altamar went to the University of Washington armed with a baseball bat and looking for North Koreans. For the record, the Asian couple that he threatened were Chinese, not Koreans. July 2020, Susie Zhao, a professional poker player, was raped and burned to death while she was still alive. Her killer, Jeffrey Morris, has prior convictions for 3rd-degree criminal sexual assault and misdemeanor domestic violence. He's currently pending trial. November 8, 2020, Kanaquan Smith was shot to death by her husband, Scott Smith. He had filed for divorce a couple of weeks before he killed her. He claimed that she'd tried to attack him with a butcher knife, so he had no choice but to kill her. Well, that's one way to get out of paying alimony. But he didn't have anything to worry about because white privilege is the order of the day. Prosecutors dropped all charges against Scott Smith, saying that there just wasn't enough evidence to charge him with anything. December 23, 2020. Just 9 months after Minneapolis police murdered George Floyd, police in California kneeled on Angelo Quinto's neck until he was unconscious. He died in the hospital 3 days later. Keep in mind, this was only 9 months after the murder of George Floyd, which was still fresh in the national consciousness, by the way. Due to the similarity between the manner of killing of Floyd and Quinto, this killing did manage to get a few headlines, but what it didn't get were any international protests by Asians like they did to protect Peter Liang after he killed Akai Gurley. If any incident should have galvanized Asians to replicate the totally unprecedented response and support they gave to Peter Liang, it should have been the killing of Angelo Quinto. But it didn't. A few tepid protests was all it got, local protests. And then, nothing. Most of you hadn't even heard of the killing of Angelo Quinto until I told you about it just now. March 10th, 2021. John Stryden sexually assaulted an Asian woman in a San Jose train station tunnel. Prosecutors are handling this as a hate crime, but we already know that they're going to quietly drop the hate crime enhancements as soon as the cameras go away because white privilege. Just 2 days ago, Tuesday, March 16th, Robert Aaron Long decided to go on a cross-state kill spree in Georgia. He killed 4 people in Cherokee County, and then he went into Atlanta and killed 4 more. 6 of his 8 victims were Asians. In fact, it was Asian massage parlors, quote-unquote, that he went to perform his executions. He claimed that the reason that he did it was he was a sex fiend and, well, he couldn't control his urges. A captain in the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office said that Aaron Long was having, quote, a really bad day. Yep. When these white supremacists see one of their own pull off some killing, they immediately circle the wagons and get on code. By the way, we still don't know if the police decided to take this Long character to Burger King first. Well, since he didn't kill black people, I highly doubt it. And finally, yesterday, March 17th, Stephen Jenkins attacked not 1 but 2 elderly Asians in a brutal attack in San Francisco.
Well, there you have it. These essentially the attacks on Asians that, if you notice, the media is definitely not reporting. They're definitely not informing the public of these because they want the narrative to stay that blacks are attacking Asians. And so as Professor Black Truth masterfully and intelligently broke that down, and again, I like to give honor to him with all the great research he did to pop up those news stories that most of us did not know previous to him reporting it. Because the best news that you will ever find is in local news stations, not national news. But they understand that national news is the one news that can essentially spew out and project propaganda in order to manipulate and change minds of the people. Because that's all you're hearing right now, family, that somehow on a large scale that blacks are attacking Asians. But these attacks, that some of them were mass killings that you're just finding out, you probably knew no knowledge of. Only small news agencies in these towns and cities are reporting this. And at the end, one of the Asian gentlemen who died in a similar fashion as George Floyd got no publicity on a worldwide level. Even though the race soldiers are still at it by killing everyone who's non-white, 1, then 2, all the Asian hate versus the white dominant society is not being reported at the same expulsion, at the same level that everyone can see where the actual hate is coming from. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Black Post. No matter if you loved it or hated, the message was delivered. So before you go out there and start capping for Asians and speaking up for Asians, I want you to understand a couple of things. 1, the hate that the Asian community has put on the Black population. 2, the propaganda and the narrative that the Democratic Party has switched to foundational Black Americans to make us the culprit of Asian hate, while all the while has been the dominant society and the white supremacists. Then 3, the easiest one anyone can do. Before you speak up for any other group, speak up for your damn own.